John chapter 11. And of course, this here in John chapter 11, is Lazarus dying, and these sisters, Mary and Martha, they tell Jesus about this. John 11:1, now a certain man was sick, named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment, and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore his sisters sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. Father, we pray your blessing upon your word now. We pray in Jesus' name, and amen. Here in verse 4, Jesus makes a remarkable statement. He said, This sickness is not unto death. But look down there in verse 13. Howbeit Jesus spake of his death. Verse 14, Then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead. But he says in verse 4, This sickness is not unto death. He obviously means Lazarus is dead, but I'm going to raise him up from the dead. In other words, It's not a final death. Lazarus, by the end of the chapter, we're going to see that Jesus is going to raise him up. He lived on this earth. He died. Now the Lord's going to raise him up. He's going to live. It doesn't say how long he lives again, but then he had to die again. Poor old Lazarus, he had to die twice, but he got to live twice too. And so when Jesus says in verse 4, when Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not unto death. Well, what do you mean he's not unto death? Well, what he means is he's dead, but he's not going to stay dead. But for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. Now that shows you something else. I mean, you can preach spiritual application all through here and teach and preach stuff through here. And it's loaded, this whole chapter. But what that shows you is death is a terrible thing to mankind. I mean, death, when one of our loved ones passes away, even if they're saved, there's a separation for a while and we miss them. We love them. And it brings grief and heartache to our souls and to our hearts. But this shows you that even though that this man died, it says it's for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. It might, I don't know what it might take in a person's life for God to be glorified through their life. I don't know what it might take for others to be saved. I've heard of somebody dying and several people get saved, family members and everything else. My father-in-law passed away in 1989, and 29 years ago. 29 years ago. And after he passed away, he was saved, and there were several people in my wife's family that got saved. And so this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God. So terrible things that we consider bad, terrible, whatever it might be, and we don't like them, it goes against us. God might somehow be able to turn that thing for the glory of God. Yeah. Verse 5, Now Jesus loved Martha. Now the end of verse 3, they say to him, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. Verse 5, Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Self-explanatory. And then, this here... verse 6, when he had heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. Now, this is another thing. We think that, God's not going to allow bad things to happen in our lives. But this man here, he died. But it's for the glory of God. And we don't look at it that way. We say, and of course, Mary and Martha are going to say later on in the chapter, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother wouldn't have died. In other words, I'm not trying to add to the Bible, but it's kind of like you can sense this thing in their voices like, where have you been, man? If you'd have got here, she wouldn't have died. But see, all that means nothing, because it means something to them, but to the Lord, he's going to raise this guy up from the dead. So in verse 6 here, when he had heard therefore that he was sick, he abode you'd think he'd run right over there. He didn't run right over there. A lot of times, because God don't run right to our emergency immediately, we think that, God, what are you doing? How come don't you love me? What's going on? But his ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. That's when it really comes to trusting God. I mean, when things happen in our lives, this is a terrible thing. The guy died. This is their brother. Martha and Mary, their brother Lazarus, died. And the Lord, he abodes 2 days still in the same place where he is. He abode, in other words, he hung around 2 days where he was at. Then he left, and it took him 2 days to get there. Because later on in the chapter, we're going to see when he gets there, it's been 4 days. And of course, some Southern gospel groups got a song that says when he's 4 days late, he's right on time. And they get that from this right here in John 11. So when you think God's late, he's right on time. God knows, God can see the whole picture. He can see the whole picture. You and I can only see a part of the pie. Just a little sliver of the pie. He sees the whole thing. Verse 7. Then after that, saith he to his disciples, let us go into Judea again. Verse 8, his disciples say unto him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and goest thou thither again? They sought to stone him back in chapter 10. Verse 31, John 10:31, then the Jews took up stones again to stone him. So now here in the next chapter, John 11, his disciples say to him there, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and goest thou thither again? The Lord, he isn't afraid of anything. He is not afraid of anything. They're saying, what are you going to go back through that way for? They sought to stone you here recently. I mean, what do you want to get? You want to die? You want to get killed? Well, he eventually does get murdered here in about 9 chapters. Verse 9, Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he seeth the light of this world. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because there is no light in him. So in verse 9 there, he talks about there's 12 hours in the day. Now, he says in verse 8, his disciples say unto him, the Jews of late sought to stone thee. You got to face the facts. The apostles were concerned with more than just the thought that Jesus might be killed. They were worried about what the Jews might do with any rocks they had left over and kill them. There isn't a Christian alive who hasn't worried about the personal fallout that would occur to them if they obeyed God's directive will in their life. And these men were no different. That's one of the first things that a lot of missionaries, especially missionary wives. You know, a woman likes security. A man, what a man looks at, men and women are different. I know you all know that. But men and women are different emotionally, physically, everywhere. What a man looks at, like, let's go to Africa. Let's win the lost to Jesus. An adventure. Because God put that in a man. God puts that in men. A man is the aggressor in the relationship, generally. I know today we kind of... Don't get me started on that. My son Aaron said, Dad, a lot of these girls at school here, he said, they are so aggressive. But anyways, the way, let me just say, the way it used to be, the male is the aggressor. That's the way God designed it. God designed. That man invents things. He wants to be an explorer. He wants to make things. He wants to build things. He wants to. You say, where did you get that? God. Amen. Right. Got it from God. And then, and so the woman, what he looks at as an adventurous, stepping out on faith, living by faith, living for God, and glorifying God. She's sitting there biting her fingernails thinking, see, I got 3 or 4 kids, and he wants to go to Africa or New Guinea and live in a little stinking hut. And there's spiders as big as I am, and there's snakes, and there's lions and tigers and everything else. How are we going to live? Where are we going to get support? She's thinking of the security things, because I'm not saying it in a negative way. That's the way God made a woman. A woman guides the house. Titus 2 talks about it. Guides the house. Guiding the house and being ruler over the house is 2 different things. But Don't get me started on that. Amen. I might get stoned to death like Jesus almost got stoned here. But anyways, guiding the house. When our kids were all at home there, my wife knew what my kids needed. I didn't know half the time. This one needs shoes. This one's, they all played, all the boys played sports. Baseball, football, basketball, soccer, everything else. And this one needs this one, and this one, we got a note from the school, and they need this, and they got to have this. She knew about all that. She guided the house. Most men generally speaking, they don't know about those things. And a lot of times, they don't really want to, my wife can take care of that. And that's part of guiding the house. She knows, she says, do you know we're out of milk? We're out of this. If I want to make this, I need this. She knows a lot of the intricate things as far as the home. And that's the way God made men and women different. And, there's a lot of different ways, but that's one of the ways. And so what a lot of missionary wives, what these missionaries, they look at this man and think, man, let's step out. We're going to China. We're going to go to China, a communist country. And the wife's sitting there thinking, China? Or we're going to New Guinea. We're going to Africa, or even in maybe not those third world countries, but any country. She's thinking about how are we going to live? How are we going to pay our bills? Where are we going to get support at? All this type of thing. Most men, I'm not saying men don't think about those things, but most men are thinking, let's tackle the world for Jesus. And the wife says, huh? Tackle the world for Jesus. What about our children? Where are we going to live? And so that's a difference. And these disciples are thinking about, what's going to happen to them if they go with him. And then it goes on here in verse 8, his disciples say unto him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and goest thou thither again? In other words, you're going to go back there again where you just almost got stoned? Verse 9, Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he seeth the light of this world. Jewish time starts at 6 a.m. When that Samaritan woman back in chapter 4, when Jesus was there at the well, it was about the 6th hour of the day. The 6th hour of the day Jewish time would be about 12 noon. It was hot over there, believe me. And Jesus was at the well outside the city there. The 6th hour of the day. All right, so that's Jewish time, 6 a.m. Our time starts midnight. Tonight at midnight will be a new day. And so Jewish time says there's 12 hours, 6 a.m. To 6 p.m. and then 6 p.m. to 6, so forth. Verse 10, But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because there is no light in him. Now he's talking spiritually, obviously. And a lot of people are stumbling around in darkness today because they're lost. They're not saved. And, this is the condemnation that light is coming to the world, and men love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. It says in John 3:19. So man loved darkness. Men love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. They prefer evil. Verse 11, These things said he, and after that he saith unto them, Our friend Lazarus sleepeth. Now notice what he says. But I go that I may awake him out of sleep. Then said his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well. Howbeit, verse 13, Jesus spake of his death. But they thought that he had spoken of taking of rest in sleep. Then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead. Now, let me say this. Whenever you find the Bible speaking about a saint of God sleeping, it's always the body sleeping. We got many false religions and false cults that teach that the soul sleeps. That's not according to the Word of God. I'm going to give you 3 or 4 verses. We're going to run them. Turn to Matthew 27 and is one of them. And I'm going to show you that when a Christian dies, the body sleeps, but the soul is with the Lord. You go to be with the Lord. But when the Bible speaks about they sleep, it's only in reference to the body. And I'll give you 4 verses to prove it. One of them is in Matthew 27, verse 52. This is after Jesus died. Matthew 27:50. Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent, and the graves were open, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose. Notice, many bodies, not souls. There's a difference. You are a trichotomy.
Amen.
You ever seen a tricycle? It has 3 wheels. You have a live body, a live soul, and a dead spirit. When you look at me, you see my body. But this here, this flesh, is going back to the dust. I have a soul, and I am a soul. I'm a soul. I'm an eternal soul. I'm going to live forever in heaven. And then I have a spirit. There's man's spirit. All right, you're born with a live body, a live soul, and a dead spirit. Amen. And that's why you must be born again. Right. Regenerated. You're quickened. You're made alive. You have a live body, a live soul, and a dead spirit. The graves, in verse 52, and the graves were open, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city, and appeared unto many. So it's the body that sleeps. It's the body that sleeps. Now turn, if you would, to 1 Corinthians 11. 1 Corinthians 11. And this, of course, is where many of the Corinthians came to the Lord's Supper with unconfessed sin in their lives. And God literally killed some of them. He brought them home early because of a premature death because of unconfessed sin at the Lord's Supper. 1 Corinthians 11, verse 30. For this cause many are weak and sickly among you, and many sleep. That's saved people. That's saved people sleeping. Many bodies of the saints which slept arose. Matthew 27:52. Then here in 1 Corinthians 11:30, for this cause many are weak and sickly among you, and many sleep. So God brought some of these Corinthian Christians home early because of unconfessed sin, partaking of the Lord's Supper. Now turn to 1 Thessalonians 4, over to the right a few books. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, and look at these verses. These verses are to prove to you that there's a part of you when you die that is your body, of course, and your body is what sleeps. The soul goes to be with God. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? Mark 8:36 and 37. Every human being that you see in this world is a soul. We say they have a soul, but they do have a soul, but they are a soul. God breathed into the nostrils there, into man's nostrils. He became a living soul. Genesis 2:7, I believe it is. Man became a living soul. You are a soul. When you die, I'm not trying to be gross, but I'm just stating it like it is. Not like it is. When you and I die, they put you in a casket. And what happens is, you know, by the end of John 11, kind of get ahead of ourselves, but by the time Jesus arrives, and here in John 11, what we're studying, Martha and Mary say, Lord, he's been dead 4 days. By this time, he stinketh. A human body begins to rot after just, I don't know, I'm not a medical doctor, but I think within a couple, 3 days, if you, a lot of times utility workers will be working out in the woods somewhere, you know, doing telephone lines or utility lines or whatever, and they'll smell this rottenness smell. The smell of a dead human body, they say, is the worst smell that you could ever smell. A skunk smells like perfume compared to a dead human body. And they smell that, and a lot of them, sometimes they know what that smell is, a dead human body. That's why they have to embalm you. The morticians at the funeral home embalm. And they, you know, the fluid and so forth. They drain it out of your blood and everything out of you. And by this time, he stinketh. He's been dead 4 days because they haven't embalmed him. And he stinks. He's a dead body. That's why we take showers. That's why we take baths. I'm not trying to be gross. I'm just I'm stating facts. And this old body is corruptible. That's what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 15. It's corruptible. And it's the body that sleeps. But a soul, as soon as you expire, as soon as you die, your soul goes back to God. And your soul goes up to heaven if you're saved. If you're lost, you go down to hell. And the spirit returns to God who gave it. You say, what happens to the body? The body just corrupts. I'm not trying to be gross, but if you dug up some of these people who've been dead for months and a year or two or three in the grave, all there'd be is bones. They put a body in there. As soon as they died, they put a body in the casket, and they put it 6 feet under. But if they dug it back up a year later, all there would probably be is just a bunch of bones. Because this old flesh just falls off. All flesh is as grass, and all the glory of man is the flower of grass. The grass withereth, and the flower thereof falleth away. But the word of the Lord endureth forever. Amen. And this is the word which by the gospel is preached unto you. 1 Peter 1, 24 and 25. That's why Paul said, for I know that in me, that is in my flesh, amen, dwelleth no good thing. Romans 7, 18. It is the spirit that quickeneth, the flesh profiteth nothing. John 6, 63. My worst enemy is this guy right there. Yeah. I'm looking at him. That's my worst enemy. If I can get this guy right here out of the way, God might be able to use me. That's the problem, folks. I'm not trying to be mean. That's the problem with a lot of professing Christians. They've never learned to get me out of the way. They have no victory. They're not faithful to God or nothing. They've never learned to get that old man out of the way. That's what Paul talks about in Romans 6, Romans 7, and Romans 8. Those 3 chapters. You ought to read them sometime. Talks about the flesh and the spirit warring in Galatians 5. Talks about it in Colossians a little bit. Paul talked about it over and over again. And he said, I find in a law that when I would do good, evil is present with me. Romans 7:21. So look here at 1 Thessalonians 4. And 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 14. This is talking about the rapture. Verse 13, but I would not have you be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that you start, concerning them which are asleep, that you startle not, even as others which have no hope. They're asleep, but their body's asleep, but they're with the Lord. In other words, the soul is with the Lord. They go immediately to be with the Lord, but the body is the one that sleeps. 14. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. You see that? Which sleep in Jesus. It's the body that sleeps. Look at chapter 5, verse 10. 1 Thessalonians 5:10. 5:10. Who died for us, talking about Jesus, that whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him. Now that's the main verse right there. That 5:10 shows you whether you wake, whether you're living on this earth, or whether you sleep, you die, you're living together with him. Well, how are you living together with him if your soul, body, and everything is asleep? It's just the body that's asleep. Your soul is with the Lord. Now, what a lot of the false cults will try, and false religions will try to convince you, is that their soul sleep. No. When you leave this world, your soul departs. We know this in Revelation. Your soul has a bodily shape. Revelation 6 over there, those souls, they had bodily shapes. They had white robes on, it talks about. We went over all this deep stuff in Revelation 3 or 4 years ago, whenever it was, in our verse-by-verse study. And so a soul has a bodily shape. When the man died and went to hell, he has a soul. And it went to hell, but he has a body. If you're saved and you die and go to heaven, you have a new glorified body. The people that die and go to hell, Luke 16, remember, he said, send Lazarus, he may dip the tip of his finger and cool my tongue. He has a tongue, for I'm tormented in his flame. He had all the senses. He could see, he could hear, he's talking. Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus. He may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue. He has a tongue. He has vocal cords, some kind of vocal cords, because he's talking. He can hear. He can feel, he can taste, he wanted water, he has all of his senses. He has a new, not glorified, but he has a new body that never burns up. That's right. You say, how in the world is God going to do all that? I don't know, you have to ask him. I'm not God. But I'm just telling you that all your loved ones that are not saved, if they don't get saved, They'll die and go to hell. They'll have a new body forever throughout the endless ages of eternity. And they'll never get out of hell. There's no purgatory. There's no limbo. Nothing like that. They'll never get out, folks. That's why we got to do everything we can to witness to them and tell them about the Lord. And so 5:10 says, who died for us, that whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him. So if you're asleep, how are you going to live together with him, and your body's dead? Yeah, because your soul is with the Lord. Your soul is what is with the Lord. And that's who the Lord, and the Lord's going to bring him back. Look at chapter 4. Look at chapter 4, verse 14. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. So when a Christian dies, they go to be with the Lord. And then when the rapture takes place, he's going to bring them with him. When he raptures the church, it says here in 4:14. These verses show you, let's go back to John 11. These verses show you Matthew 27:52, 1 Corinthians 11:30, 1 Thessalonians 4:14, 1 Thessalonians 5:10. Those verses show you that it's the body that sleeps and not the soul. It's the body that sleeps and not the soul. That's the main thing I want you to get. All right, John chapter 11, verse 13. Howbeit Jesus spake of his death, but they thought that he had spoken of taking of rest and sleep. Then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. It's implied here in verse 15 that if Christ would have been there, Lazarus couldn't have died. Because nobody, as far as I can see in the Gospels, nobody ever died in the immediate presence of Christ. Because he's the way, the truth, and the life. John 14:6. And if somebody was dead, when Christ showed up, he raised him up. He raised him up. So look down here at verse 21. Martha says to Jesus there, then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. And it's implied that that's the truth. Back up there in verse 15, he said, I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. In other words, the Lord says, I'm glad I wasn't there. They're going to say, if you'd have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. He says, I'm glad I wasn't there. What? Come on, Lord, don't you love it? Yeah, it says he loves these people here. But you see, the Lord, he's got another thing in mind. And all I can tell you, folks, is there comes times in our lives when things happen that butt up against what we want in our lives or our family members' lives or whatever. You just got to trust God. You have to trust God, that God is in complete control. It says here a couple times, we read the first few verses, that he loves these people. Behold how he loved him. He loves these people. But yet, they're looking at it like, Martha and Mary, if you'd have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. What's taking you so long? 4 days? I mean, come on. Lord, I'm glad I wasn't there. To the intent you may believe. If it's implied if he'd have been there, then he couldn't have died. And then we'll go a couple other verses here and we'll stop. Verse 16, then said Thomas, remember doubting Thomas, which is called Didymus, unto his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. Man, he's got a lot of faith, don't he? Old doubting Thomas, there he is again. Now, you know what? There's a twofold thing here, though. You got to give him credit. He thinks they're going to die because they tried to stone him in the previous chapter. We see in chapter 10, verse 31. And Thomas is thinking, man, he's going to get stoned to death. Let's go with him so we can die with him. At least he wants to die with the Lord. But it also shows a lack of faith on the other hand, because he's not going to die when he's going to end up arriving there where Lazarus is at the end of the chapter. So there's doubting Thomas again. Let's go with him that we may die with him. We might as well die, get murdered together. That's doubting Thomas. See? And verse 17, then when Jesus came, he found that he had lain in the grave 4 days already. Now Bethany was nigh unto Jerusalem, about 15 furlongs off. Furlong, according to my Bible here, is 1/8 of a mile. So 15 furlongs, what is that, a couple miles? Maybe about a couple miles. Now Bethany was nigh unto Jerusalem, about 15 furlongs off. Verse 19, many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary sat still in the house. Now we'll stop right there at verse 20. Let me mark that. But we're going to see the difference in these two ladies next Sunday night. The Lord don't come back. And we'll stop there at chapter 11, verse 20, 21 there. And Martha and Mary, we're going to see them in Luke's gospel. We're going to see them in the next chapter, chapter 12. But Martha and Mary, you need Marthas and Marys in churches. And Martha is encumbered about much serving. She's active. Mary sits at the feet of Jesus and hears his word. Now, there's a time to sit at his word, and there's a time to be active. You know, to everything there's a season, a time to every purpose under the heaven, it says in Ecclesiastes 3:1. And as I close, I want to say this. What the devil will try to get you to do, he'll try to get you to do something that God don't want you to do now, he maybe wants you to do later. A timing thing with God is very important. There are sometimes, as I mentioned many times, missionaries, God calls them a missionary, but it's 3 to 5 to 7 years before they actually get to the field. So they think God called us, let's go. No, there might be a waiting period. There's a deputation trail, raising money, you know, so you can live when you're over there. And then God uses that. God uses usually in a missionary's life. A lot of missionaries don't even realize this, but a lot of times God will use the time they spend on deputation to mold him and his wife and get them ready to get to the mission, to go to the mission field. And so, anyways, Mary sat still in the house. All right, and so there's a difference in these two women, and we'll go over these different things when next Sunday night. All right. All right. We want to.